Alrighty, Eryn. Thanks for having a chat today. Both yourself and Moza have been in the academy now for close to 3 months. Can you take us back to when Mo first joined the academy and what were his biggest obstacles before joining?
Yeah, for sure. I think before joining GSP, I would say that Mo was already a pretty solid performing 12-year-old. He's pretty naturally athletic and kind of pretty capable across multiple sports. So I never saw his physical game as a long-term barrier for him. But his main challenges have always been more on that mental side, particularly handling pressure, managing his emotions, during matches, and maybe bringing his ability into competition like consistently, not just when he's in front or playing well and winning. So I think a year before, or the 12 months prior to joining GSP, we had been working with a sports psychologist, and because we have been attempting to get him help in this area. And the sports psych, it helped and did definitely bring some foundational tools. But looking ahead, I think what I felt was missing or he needed more of was something that was just a bit more practical, something more consistent and ongoing, because learning the tools has been great and it's one thing, but then actually applying them, I feel, is just like another skill altogether, and it takes practice. And so I started to seek out ways that maybe I could get him some help to begin building the habits that are required. And through a little bit more of a mentorship rather than just receiving counselling and psychological advice. And I came across GSP because I knew another junior who has been working with you a lot, and I had seen them, I suppose, improve in this area in particular around, performing under pressure, and I'd seen them improve a lot. And that really stood out to me, because that's kind of exactly the gap I'm trying to help fill for Mo. So, yeah, that was really his main challenges is around that kind of mental strength and emotional control.
Yep. So in regards to, his mindset on court and, the mental part of the game and being consistent with that, consistently being able to maintain, a good in-between point routine and just staying positive out on the court. How has Grand Slam Performance Academy helped Mo up until this point?
Look, I think the most noticeable shift is really his mindset and his maturity towards his own growth. So he's now a lot better at reflecting on his performance. Like, he could always reflect, and he's always pretty good at identifying what he wanted to improve, but there was never any kind of consistency on what those areas were. And I think that they tended to be more technical and tactical because I suppose there was a mechanism through his tennis coaching to actually address those. Whereas now, well, firstly, his reflections are kind of broader. They identify things like decision-making under pressure and emotional control. And, he kind of rates himself on how quickly did he move on or deal with adversity. But most importantly, I think that the GSP, like the weekly calls now provide him with a mechanism and a system for addressing those areas. So now those skills are being trained and developed in a more systematic way rather than just sporadically. And I think a big part of that improvement and shift is really attributed to the week calls, because they give him a consistent and judgment-free space to reflect and it's not coming from me, because I think when it comes to me, it always feels like criticism. And so, in the calls, when advice is coming from you, it's just received differently. And I think you do particularly a really good job of like creating a psychologically safe environment for the kids, because they're all really open and they're really willing to share and be honest. And I think for Moza, hearing other kids, their experiences has really helped him too, because he realizes maybe that he's not alone, or that, it's okay that this stuff's hard, because look, other kids find it hard too, so it kind of normalizes that. And so, yeah, I've seen probably a really big shift in his ability to control his emotion under pressure.
Yep.
In more recent results, he's been able to move on quicker. Whereas in the past, that probably would have derailed the entire set. And it's only been a few months, as you said, like 3 months in the program. So for me, I feel like there's a lot of scope still for a lot of improvement. It feels kind of endless, and that he's only really just getting started. So yeah, I feel positive about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's been a big growth in that reflection, like you were saying. So obviously, with a couple of big tournaments coming up in the next couple of weeks, it'll be exciting to see how he goes.
Yeah, and the accountability of the calls, to keep him journaling and stuff. I think that just starts to build the habits, right?
Yep,
Because it's not something that then he just does during tournament season.
for
He's
sure.
doing it every week. Yeah, so that
Yeah, definitely.
definitely is making a big difference.
Awesome. What's it done for you as a parent, Eryn? So obviously, there's a lot of conversations parents are having with their children on a daily, particularly on the weekend. Before, after a match.
Yeah.
You talk about like the reflection that he's doing after every
Mm.
practice, after every match. How
Mm.
has that made your job easier as a tennis parent?
Look, definitely. I think on a personal note, it's given me a lot of hope because, like, pretty much every 12 weeks, there's another tournament block, and those times come around pretty quickly, and I've always felt so stressed leading up to those times and during those times because I know what's coming, and at the end of every one of those blocks, like without joking, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm done. I'm like, I'm so ready to quit,
Yeah.
because I feel so overwhelmed and I feel helpless and I'm exhausted from having to like pick up the emotional train wreck, at the end of every one of those matches. But since being part of GSP, my hopes, I suppose, have moved from wishful thinking to kind of a bit more optimism and a bit more optimistic, because I feel like now there's actually an engine
Yeah.
for change to take place. So it's given me a real sense of freedom that I'm kind of grateful for. And, I can kind of step back and spend more time, just being a parent and being unconditionally supportive rather than, trying to guide and direct.
Yep.
So that is definitely, for me personally, been something that I've noticed a lot. Like coming up to this next tournament block, I don't feel anywhere near as stressed.
Yeah. Yeah, something's going to be done about it. And it is, speaking to parents
Yeah.
all the time, it's incredibly stressful and trying to, stop the cycle of, I hope this week's better or I hope the next
Yeah.
stretch is better. Having a plan in place definitely takes away some of that stress as a parent. What would you
Yeah.
say to parents who are on the fence, they're thinking about joining the academy? What would your advice be to them?
Look, if you're either a parent like me who has felt or is feeling really overwhelmed and helpless and ready to give up, it's definitely worth giving it a go. And also just if if parents have children who struggle under pressure, maybe have a lot of anxiety or fear, when things aren't going their way, maybe they struggle with perfectionism. There's just a lot more to tennis than the technical and tactical training that you get from private coaching. And, the mental side, the emotional control, the reflection, it's often overshadowed. And I think it's a bit of a misconception that one coach can kind of cover all of those things. So from my experience, I really found that GSP has kind of filled that gap. And it's not to say that tennis coaches aren't focused on those other elements or that they don't think that they're important, because obviously they know they're important. But I think it's more simply that the practice of dedicating time specifically to improving those skills, while having the mentoring support there along the way, is what makes the difference. And so, yeah, I feel that that's kind of where GSP is really filling a gap that I wasn't able to to find anywhere else. And especially for parents of teenagers, because at that time between the ages of 12 and 15, it's kind of really critical for the parent-child relationship to try and stay connected. But it's also a really challenging time to stay connected because there's a lot of emotions at play. So yeah, just being able to take a step back and kind of GSP directing a little bit more in the guidance, helping the kids take more ownership themselves for their own development and growth is just, I think it's helpful, and it allows parents to be parents. So.